Witness Windhoff's shocking retelling of Custer's last stand. Charles Windolph was a United States Army soldier who engaged in the Battle of Little Bighorn. Acting as a private in Company L, 7th Cavalry Regiment, Windhoff stood among the very few who survived. A German immigrant, he enlisted in the Army in 1872 and served for 5 years, receiving the Medal of Honor for his courageous actions throughout the battle. His description of the engagement is considered among the most thorough and precise, cementing his status as a renowned individual in American history. Before we start, please like and subscribe to our channel to assist our growing community. On that destined Sunday, June 25th, close to midday, we passed over the divide separating the Rosebud and the Little Bighorn. Our regiment was arranged in column of march, heading westward. The soldiers of each company rode 4 across, maintaining a space of 50 or 60 feet separating the companies. Abruptly, we stopped, and Lieutenant Cook directed Benteen to take his Company H plus D under Captain Weir and K under Lieutenant Godfrey to examine the hills and fight any hostiles discovered. General Custer kept troops Weimar, F, C, and L, while Major Reno commanded troops M, A, and G, with the majority of the Indian Scouts under Lieutenants Varnum and Hare. Our 7th Cavalry, made up of 600 men, was split into detachments, chasing Indian forces in broken landscape. We understood a substantial force of hostiles was positioned 12 to 15 miles west, yet the precise count stayed unknown. Our Indian scouts guessed at several thousand hostiles, but Custer and most officers calculated facing 1,000 to 1,500 warriors, probably inadequately armed. They anticipated a rearguard action, permitting the Indians to flee. Instead, we confronted a force possibly double that size, surpassing Custer's 600 men by 5 to 1. Custer intended a surprise dawn assault on June 26th, but chose to strike right away when hostile scouts spotted his column. Benteen, commanding 3 troops, rode forward to scout. We moved across difficult terrain which was demanding for the horses. From every following hilltop, Lieutenant Gibson motioned back that he observed no indications of Indians. Even the troopers in the ranks believed we were on a pointless mission. After 2 hours, we swung back onto Custer's trail, glad to be returning to the small valley. We proceeded west along a tiny stream where the leading pack mules became trapped in a bog, underscoring the pack train's sluggish speed. As we left, we detected far-off firing ahead. Captain Weir took his company, and Benteen was in front of him. We all understood we would shortly be in combat. Not long after departing the swamp, we passed a burning tepee, probably ignited by our Indian scouts. The horses perceived danger, becoming agitated. Approximately then, we noticed Sergeant Knipe of Tom Custer's C Troop carrying an order for Captain McDougal to hurry with the pack mules. Benteen told him to go back down the trail. We then saw Trumpeter Martini, injured but conveying a message from Custer to Benteen to bring the packs promptly. Martini, a spirited little Italian who had acted as a drummer boy with Garibaldi in the struggle for Italian independence, was known to me because he was part of H Troop. We used to joke with him kindly, but never did so again following this battle. He showed himself to be a genuine man of mettle. His horse was bleeding heavily from a bullet injury in its right hip, but Martini was unaware of it. Benteen instructed him to return to his company. I have always supposed that Benteen considered it needless to send more word to Captain McDougal, since Sergeant Knipe had already communicated the instruction to bring on the pack train with all speed. In any event, Martini's horse was spent, and he fought to stay with us. The noise of heavy firing increased, and shortly we met several Crow or Ree-scouts herding a few Indian ponies. They yelled, "Soldiers," and motioned toward the bluffs climbing to the north. We realized we were approaching the valley of the Little Bighorn, and that intense fighting was occurring nearby. Benteen ordered us to pull our pistols, and we charged up the bluffs at a gallop, expecting a sudden meeting with hostiles. After reaching the top of the first series of rolling hills, the river valley abruptly opened up before us to the left. The scene that greeted our eyes was sufficient to instill fear into the hearts of the most courageous men. Beneath us, maybe 150 feet or further down in the valley and about half a mile away, shapes on horseback were racing madly, with gunshots echoing everywhere. Further along the river, we observed big groups of mounted men whom we believed to be Indians. We were riding at a rapid pace ourselves and had only just caught sight of this sorrowful battlefield when we saw mounted and dismounted soldiers on a knoll to the north. We rode quickly toward them, our hearts beating with expectation. I will stop here to relate the destiny of our companions with Reno. Remember that around 12:15 p.m., Reno was placed in charge of 3 troops, 17 Crow and Ree scouts, and 3 white scouts. Custer, leading 5 troops, continued in column to the right, while Reno's column went to the left. Benteen, with 3 troops, was told to scout the rough hills to the south and west, and I, being with Benteen, did not see the occurrences that transpired over the next 5 hours. Nevertheless, I have listened to the reports so often that I will try to convey them in the most straightforward way possible. Be aware that I was not there and am recounting the tales shared by survivors. As the 2 battalions went down into the dry creek bottom, they would sometimes come within 50 yards of each other, and on other occasions be as distant as 200 yards apart. Both columns trotted westward in the direction of the Little Bighorn. Around 2 p.m., they found a burning teepee holding the body of an Indian warrior slain in General Crook's fight with the Indians only a week before, less than 20 miles away. One of the white scouts ahead yelled back to Custer that hostiles were close, remaining outside rifle range. Custer then signaled Major Reno to ford the creek and directed Adjutant Cook to order Reno the Little Bighorn 2 miles further west, then assault the Indian village to the right, with the idea that the whole force would give support. This last statement has been a disputed point, argued by many, concerning the tragic events that were soon to happen. Reno led his force of 120 men, along with a few guides and scouts, at a quick trot, crossing the Little Bighorn ahead and stopping only to water their horses and reform in troop formation on the west bank of the river. The west side of the river offered a reasonably flat valley, about half a mile to a mile in breadth, extending to a low plateau in the west. On the other side of the Little Bighorn, the Wolf Mountains rose sharply, with coulees coming down from the bluffs to the river bottom at different spots. The river, roughly 100 to 150 feet wide, ran clear and cold, with a gravel bottom. For almost 3 miles along the west bank, the Indian camps were set up, with each of the 5 Sioux tribes, Cheyennes, Blackfeet, and Arapahoes, occupying distinct circles spaced about a quarter-mile apart. To the west, huge pony herds fed, watched by Indian boys and squaws. It is estimated that about 10,000 Indians, nearly 1/3 of all Sioux tribesmen, were there, including 2,000 to 3,000 warriors. This is a good point to correct a widespread misunderstanding about the hostiles' weapons. Against common thought, not every warrior was supplied with modern repeating Winchester rifles and plenty of ammunition. In my judgment, half of the warriors bore only bows, arrows, and lances, while half of the rest employed various old muzzle-loaders, single-shot rifles, and miscellaneous arms. Only about 25 to 30% of the warriors owned modern repeating rifles. Another significant fact, Indian boys, 14 years and older, went with the warriors and took an active part in the battle, particularly in its later phases. The soldiers, meanwhile, were equipped with single-shot .45-70 caliber Springfield carbines, a weapon famous for its precision and lethality up to 600 yards. However, when discharged rapidly, the breech would get dirty, and the greasy cartridges would frequently jam, declining to be pulled out by the extractor. This required using a hunting knife to pry out the empty shell, a process that cost the lives of many a trooper on that destined Sunday. Every soldier also carried a 6-shot single-action Colt Army revolver, the newest model obtainable. The troops had been instructed to carry 100 rounds of rifle ammunition and 24 rounds of revolver ammunition, either on their body or in their saddlebags. As the troopers got off their horses and every fourth man acted as a horseholder, many of the horse mounts were stampeded, causing the loss of thousands of rounds of crucial ammunition, especially for Custer's men. But to return to Reno's battalion, after crossing the river, they formed a line in columns of fours with the Indian scouts on their left. Soon, Indian horsemen were observed riding wildly back and forth in the valley, and the southern edge of the Indian camps became visible. Reno then arranged his 3 troops and scouts in a skirmish line, spanning the full width of the narrow valley. Troop M was on the right, A in the middle, and G on the left, with the scouts riding to their left front. Major Reno dismounted his men, creating a skirmish line with 75 yards separating each soldier. After advancing half a mile toward the Indian camp, they met a large group of mounted Indians who rushed down upon them. For 10 minutes, Reno's men kept their position, firing continuously, but were quickly surrounded by hundreds of mounted Indians, many employing repeating rifles. Understanding the risk of being encircled, Reno ordered his men to retreat, mounting them in good order and withdrawing 300 yards. This was no sooner done than hundreds of mounted Indians again rushed down upon them. Reno formed his troops in a skirmish line and again dismounted, firing steadily. For 10 minutes they held their ground, but the Indians steadily moved in from all directions, shooting at close range and causing serious losses. Fearing total envelopment, Reno ordered his men to fall back to a grove of cottonwoods half a mile to the rear. Sadly, in the turmoil, many troopers got separated from their companies, the horses stampeded, and the men broke in wild disarray. It is here that the greatest casualty numbers took place. Many troopers were shot off their horses, killed immediately, or mutilated and scalped. The survivors crossed the river in confusion, climbing a steep hill on the east bank, closely followed by hundreds of mounted Indians. About 15 to 20 soldiers died in the river and along the riverbank. Once Reno's men got to the hilltop, the Indians pulled back. At this decisive moment, around 2:30 p.m., Captain Weir with his D Troop arrived, followed closely by Benteen's troops H and K. Although Reno's forces were in disorder, the coming of reinforcements re-established some order. Benteen swiftly evaluated the situation and told his men to assume defensive positions. Soon they were joined by Captain McDougall's Troop B and the pack train, bringing much-needed ammunition and supplies. The combined forces dug in on the hill, getting ready for a desperate defense. Custer, meanwhile, had continued down the river with his 5 troops, trying to flank the Indian village. As they rode north along the bluffs, they came upon the main body of the hostiles. At the northern end of the valley, near the present-day location of the National Cemetery, the full extent of the Indian forces became clear. Custer's men were soon overrun by the sheer quantity of warriors. Despite their brave efforts, they were surrounded and killed, fighting to the final man. As evening came, Reno and Benteen's forces on the hill could hear the distant sounds of battle, understanding the terrible fate that had probably befallen their comrades. The night was spent in anxious waiting, with occasional skirmishes as the Indians probed their defenses. By morning, the Indians started to withdraw, having achieved a decisive victory. The survivors of Reno and Benteen's battalions were finally relieved by General Terry's column, arriving 2 days later. The Battle of Little Bighorn remains a deep and tragic chapter in American history. The courage and endurance of soldiers like Charles Windolph, who lived to share their story, provide a moving look into the harsh truths of frontier warfare. This retelling offers a detailed and lively viewpoint on one of the most legendary battles in the Great Sioux War of 1876. Keep watching for more first-hand accounts of various battles. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time.